super fun, and all about artisan cheese and more to melt your peaceful heart and toast your peaceful life. Coming to you from the Appalachian Mountains of southwestern Virginia, this is the Peaceful Heart Farmcast.
Hey, this is Scott Hall from Peaceful Heart Farm, and you are listening to the Peaceful Heart Farmcast.
Hello, everybody. Melanie Hall here. I hope you are doing very well. The conversation today and every day revolves around the value of tradition. Traditional food prep and storage, traditional cooking, and of course, traditional artisan cheese. Topics discussed here are designed to create new perspectives and possibilities for how you might add the taste of tradition to your life. Welcome, new listeners. It's so good to have you. And welcome back, veteran homestead-loving regulars. Thank you so much for stopping by the Farmcast every week. I appreciate you all so much. I'm super excited to share with you what's going on at the farm this week, and I'm super excited to share the history of our homestead dream with you. So let's do the homestead updates first, starting with the garden, which always actually seems to be at the end of our list of priorities at the moment. The strawberries are overwhelmed with wheatgrass. I believe I mentioned that the straw we bought for mulch was full of seeds. I've never seen so much waste of wheat. Scott's working on that project today, and he worked on it yesterday as well. The carrots are overrun with grass and weeds. I just looked at them. They seem to be holding their own for the moment. It will have to do until Tuesday. That's a couple of days from now. It was market today, so I didn't get to it, and church tomorrow. And I'm going to rest in the afternoon on Sunday. Cheesemaking on Monday, so hang in there, guys. Come on, little carrots. I'll save you sooner, hopefully pretty soon. And the rest of the garden needs to be weeded and fertilized as well. I still need to get the green beans planted. The peanuts didn't sprout, and those are going to need to be replanted. Then the first harvest will be happening, probably next week as well. And I use flowers as pest control, but I am so far behind on my flower starts that the bugs may take over in June. We do what we can, and you don't sweat it. Hey, that's not quite true, is it? We will be sweating a lot come next week. Scott's already sweating a lot today. So on the cows front, they're finally getting back into a routine. Cows really, really don't like change. And here's some of the things that happen with our cows. We added a new cow. And we split up our girls and put one with Butter as a companion. And then Butter had a calf. Those are all changes. And then there was the big one where we changed their feed. And once we changed their feed, all of a sudden the entire herd of Normandies no longer wanted to come into the milking shed and stick their head into the stanchion. And I don't mind so much the ones that we're not milking, but Claire and Buttercup are in milk, and they have to be milked twice a day. And they need to be in those stanchions so that we can hold them still, so that they don't accidentally step on us while we're milking them. Anyway, we fooled them into eating their food again by putting a little bit of sweet feed on top of their nutritional supplement. And they're now eating it, and they're getting better about coming into the shed without a lot of hassle. Still some work to do there, but we're making progress. We changed their dairy supplement from a garden variety from southern states to a non-GMO, non-soy dairy supplement. But it's like a kid that's used to eating at McDonald's and then being switched to organic salad greens. They were pretty petulant. Now, Butter's a different story. She will eat anything you put in front of her and beg for more. Now let's move over to the lambs and the goats. They are doing great. We couldn't be more pleased with how this group of lambs is progressing in 2019. And the goats just keep on keeping on, eating weeds and brush that the others won't touch. They've cleaned up so much around here in the way of small trees that were sprouting, briars, wild blackberry bushes, and so on. Good job. Now, another thing that's suffering with our overwhelming need of projects is the creamery project. It's been sitting idle for nearly 2 weeks. Scott had to fix the bush hog, and then he had to mow everything. He built the quail cages for when the little guys get out of the brooder and into their permanent digs. A load of gravel was delivered, and he spent quite a bit of time spreading that in the places where erosion and mud was making our lives miserable. He spent a day digging a trench for drainage out of the milking shed. And again, 2 days he's been out there in the strawberry bed. So, the days seem to slip by one after another. There's always so much to do and not enough hours in the day. That update's pretty intense with listing our setbacks on timing. But you know what? We love it and wouldn't have it any other way. Our lives are filled with purpose and meaning. The geese are strutting around with their little gaggles of goslings. The trees are leafing out. The garden is full of all kinds of plants. The calves are a joy to watch as they bask in the sun or gallivant around their pasture. We haven't taken the moment to look at the stars at night in a while, but they are there, waiting for us to enjoy their magnificence. No matter how intense it gets here, we love every minute of it. Now let me get into our Virginia life. And how do we get here? It took us a while. Maybe you've dreamed of living the homestead life, and maybe you think it's impossible, like it's a pipe dream. You'll never get there. And I just want to give you inspiration and share a bit of our journey, which actually started in the last century. Scott and I met in 1999 in western North Carolina. We were two people following similar paths who met, became lifelong friends. We apprenticed together at a spiritual training center, learning how to teach a meditation technique. And this experience is where we reconnected with our hearts and our desire to be close to the land. And the dream of our homestead life was born. It's not something you really want to do alone, so, meeting up with a partner who was into the same things, it was just a godsend. So during our training, we dreamed of a sustainable farm and communal living. We wanted to raise good food as close to nature's intended way as possible. And as far as communal living, we knew that experiencing loving relationships with others and soaking up nourishing nature would ultimately help us remember our kinship with God and creation. So two souls had found each other. Now our dream has changed and evolved over time, and it continues to evolve. We just took a step and then another, and each step clarified our vision. Each step led to the next, and sometimes that direction needed to change. We were going in a direction, we could see this isn't going to work out for us, and so we changed. And we continue to take steps, and we continue to change. And the first step began 16 years ago, beyond just the dreaming part. And we still don't have that creamery built. But we love our homestead life and all that it brings us. So 16 years ago, we bought our first piece of land in 2003 in Southwest Virginia. At first, we rented a mobile home nearby. And at this point in our lives, we had a great deal of debt. We had credit cards, school loans, taxes, and now we had a mortgage. So we set out to pay everything off in full. We would have our farm, but we would have it debt-free. Now, we're both 48 years old at this time before we actually took the first physical step towards our dream. We both took on lucrative jobs in information technology, And this was just as the electronic medical records industry was like kicking off. Again, this was back 2003, 2004. And our jobs required extensive travel. We traveled all over the U.S. and to a couple of European countries as well. Every other week, except when we were in Europe, every other week we flew home to Virginia to visit our beautiful piece of land. And then in 2005, we decided, why are we renting a mobile home from someone else? We bought our own mobile home and moved it onto our land. And in that fall, we had our wedding ceremony. It took place on our homestead. It was so beautiful. Even though it was November, the weather had permitted the leaves to change very slowly. And with very little wind and rain in this particular fall, there were many, many leaves on the trees. And we could not have asked for a more perfect time for that fall foliage to be there. I mean, 2-3 weeks past when it would normally be there. So, again, blessed with providence. So now that we had this land, we needed to learn how to produce food. We wanted to be self-sufficient as well. And so we started with livestock. We were going to do gardening, but we couldn't do gardening because we couldn't be there all the time. So we started with raising chickens in the summer of 2006. We were working on a contract, and it completed in mid-2006. And then I moved on to a different contract and continued traveling. But Scott was done with traveling, at least flying in airplanes. And he remained on the homestead, and he built a couple of chicken tractors a la Joel Salatin. And he raised, and then we processed around 100 chickens. And we ate a lot of them ourselves. We gave them a lot away to relatives and neighbors. And this part of the journey was just a taste to get our feet wet. I mean, we're still early at this point, not really knowing what we were going to do. We were experimenting. And there were many twists and turns along the way. So, somewhere along the previous 2-year period, we had paid all of our debts in full. And so the next step along the path was making the money that we needed for infrastructure, whether it be fencing and barns. We didn't know about the creamery at this time, but we needed fencing, we needed barns, and all sorts of things. So in February of 2007, Scott went back to work in Texas. I was now traveling to various places around the country every week instead of every other week. And I kind of lived in hotels and airports with a 2 quick Saturday and Sunday at home on the weekend with Scott. I mean, what a far cry from the peaceful life we envisioned. We persevered and we dreamed on. The next year, in 2008, we bought an additional 40 acres adjoining our property. And so now we're in debt again. And this time for more money than ever before. I'm telling you, it's a good thing that I got to walk around that property occasionally. Or I might have forgotten exactly why we went into debt again. And the why had to do with dreaming bigger. We were learning about raising sheep now. We'd moved on from the chickens. Still very much a dream at this point. We're still living in Texas. The timeline to move permanently to the homestead kept getting longer. You know, we've got another mortgage to pay off. That can happen when you're dreaming while making good coin. You can make the dream. I was like, oh yeah, we can do this. We can take a little bit longer. But the constant travel and living out of a suitcase got really, really old, really, really fast for me. It was fine when I was traveling with my best friend and awesome life partner. Doing it alone was torture. Within a year, I was insisting that Scott get a job closer to home. If I was going to fly home every weekend, I wanted it to be to Virginia, not Texas. And Scott made it happen. In the fall of 2008 until December 31st, 2016. Is that 8 years? 9 years? Scott traveled 6 hours every Sunday evening to Beaufort, South Carolina. Beaufort, South Carolina. And a guy by himself doesn't need much. And so he had a travel trailer that we purchased for cash for the task. He hung out in a travel trailer. I was living in hotels. Every Friday evening, he returned to the homestead in Virginia, and I would fly in. So he's driving 6 hours again. And he did it alone for the first year and a half. But then I got a job offer just outside of Savannah, Georgia. We moved that travel trailer to a park halfway between Savannah and Beaufort. So it was an hour drive for me, south, and 45 minutes north for him. And we were completely back together again as a couple. So that was a great improvement. And then in 2010, I got a job offer at the same hospital where Scott had been working for over 2 years. And I jumped on that like a duck on a June bug. We moved the travel trailer to Beaufort and cut our work commute down to 20 minutes. And we were still traveling 6 hours each way, but now there were 2 of us doing it. But we were actually able to leave a little earlier on Friday. Scott didn't have to drive south to pick me up, so we could then drive north. And we were only buying gas for 1 vehicle. So these were small but important steps on our journey. Sounds kind of convoluted. But all this unconventional living circumstance was worth it. And there was a huge amount of stress that came with it. But after all, we're now back together. We're a couple again. And that was great. We were at the homestead every single weekend, and that was great. And it was only going to be for a couple of years. Well, 5 years later, and nearly 12 years into our process at this point, I was actually stressed beyond my capacity to remain sane. I needed a nest. I needed a place to build my home. And for the final 2 years of working in Beaufort, we rented an apartment. So moving from a 100 square foot travel trailer to over 1,000 square feet of living space, that was just enough nesting happiness to get me through it. And in the end, even that wasn't enough. And we decided to make the leap to full-time homesteaders. And that was December 31st, 2016. Over 13 years of tiny steps and a couple of giant steps. And getting that creamery built is the focus of our lives right now. We are over 2 years into that process. And the dream keeps going. The dream keeps moving forward. Now, let me back up a little bit and fill in some details over that 13 years, how we grew the farm during that period. How did we go from pasture-raised chickens to artisan cheese? I mean, what the heck happened there? Well, we tried a few different things over the years. In order to succeed at a small homestead farmer, diversity is really important. You can't just monocrop. You can't just have cows. You need diversity. Now, you don't want to have all of your eggs in one basket. However, having a central core enterprise is also important. So you got one big basket and then lots of smaller baskets. That was our ideal. And in case you had a problem with your one big basket one year, you would have a couple of smaller baskets to help you get through that hard time. And this also supports our ideal of living a traditional life where in the past, where every farming family raised much of their own food in addition to their main crop or their livestock enterprise. So the weekend life that we had all those years allowed us to dabble a bit in a lot of areas. And we read a lot and we studied a lot. All of that time, people are watching TV and going places with their families and whatnot. And there was just the 2 of us and we just studied. We studied a lot. And then we did some trial and error experiments on a small scale. And there's so much that can be done on a homestead. And so which was going to be the best fit for us? Like a lot of folks, We actually tried to do too many things at once. So having that central enterprise is the only way to make it. You got to have one place where you're focusing your attention, and then you can have some other things around it, but you're going to be selective about what those are. So early on, I think I mentioned we were pretty clear that raising chickens, it was a great learning exercise, but it's not where our hearts were. Having them for eggs and meat for personal use, yes, but not as our central farm enterprise. There's infrastructure that needs to be there to support that wasn't available, mainly for the processing. Let's see, in 2009, we put in some fruit trees. That's a long-term project that continues to stretch over many years. That'll provide a little bit of income at some point, but it's mostly for personal use at this point. So it'll provide a small income at a later date. The date we actually have time to give it attention, but it's there. It's there. Now in 2010, gosh, that's 9 years ago, we bought a flock of sheep and a donkey as a guardian animal for the sheep. So we bought 12 pregnant ewes and a pregnant donkey, and we proceeded along the lines of raising sheep and selling lamb as our centerpiece. And we learned a lot over several years. At one point, we had over 70 sheep. We were doing really well. We learned a lot. But there are two things that happened that kind of prompted us to change our course yet again. An issue arose around raising and marketing lamb. We simply didn't have the land to raise enough livestock to make it profitable. And the number two thing that happened in 2011, there was a big change on the homestead. Love crept in, awakened, and rapidly altered the farm dream. So I wanted to make my own butter and cheese, and I love drinking raw milk. I can't stand the taste of cooked milk. In 2011, we bought cows. With working toward homestead sustainability as part of our mission, we also wanted beef and pork and chicken and rabbit. I mean, lots of things that we've talked about and learned about. But after researching every cow breed under the sun, we settled on the Normandy. It's a dual breed cow, a prolific milk producer, as well as producing well-marbled muscle, perfectly suited for beef. It's a traditional breed in Normandy, France. And for more details on these cows, give a listen to the Peaceful Heart Farm episode that I dedicated to them. And I think it's called Why Normandy Cows. Well, suffice it to say, I fell in love with these cows. And we knew at this point that the lamb was not going to produce the income we desired without adding a lot more pasture, which would mean going into debt again, yada, 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 and finding some even, and then going into debt. And another alternative arose out of the dream. We could build a creamery and make artisan farmstead cheese. We're still working, right, for other people at this point. We're still making good coin. So again, we're still investing money into infrastructure. So it just happened to coincide with my desire to have more of these great cows in my life. But to pay for it, how much longer are we going to have to work for someone else? Yes. That is the decision that drove the planned 2 years of living in a travel trailer to a full 7 years of that craziness of driving 6 hours on Friday and 6 hours on Sunday. But you know what? It was so worth it. And finally, I've gotten to the part of the story where the creamery comes in. It has been a wild and varied journey getting here, but this is the one. We are investing all of our time and energy into becoming a local cheese resource for our community. We will use traditional cheesemaking techniques to develop our local cheeses. I have 2 recipes that meet my expectations regarding the product I want to sell, and I have 2 others that are currently in development. And one of them is kind of failing miserably, but fear not, I will prevail. We are going to produce the best cheddar cheese that Virginia has ever seen. And with a slight tweak on the salt, I'm expecting my Alpine style cheese to be a winner this year as well. Well, the creamery still has a long way to go before passing state inspection, and I got a little time to get the cheese right. In the meantime, I'm getting to know you and getting some really good traditional cooking information together for you, traditional living information. And if you are buying local food, it really pays to know how to prepare it well. So I'm hoping to continue to help you with those ideas. Now, the latest change that we've had is still along the lines of the creamery. So we're adding the herd share program. We became aware of this need some time ago for offering herd shares to our fellow Virginians. Not everyone wants to live this life or feels like they can do it, but they want the benefit of the great food that it produces. And one of those great foods is milk from pasture-raised cows. So if you've been following me, you've heard me talk about this before. You can own a piece of a grass-fed dairy herd. We provide the land, the animals, and the labor, so you don't have to do that part. But you get the benefit of the product from your animals. And we purchased a lovely Jersey cow from a fellow farmers market vendor. And that wonderful little heifer has had her calf and is now producing wonderful A2 milk. So we are offering milk and or yogurt, and that'll be full fat or low fat with honey yogurt. During the summer months, that'll be May through October. November through April, cheese and butter will come out of the herd share. And then during times of abundance in the summer, you may find yourself with a little extra product. Your herd sometimes produces a lot of milk, and in other times, not so much. Well, let's see, what else have we got going on here? At some point, we added cashmere goats to our livestock. I'm a big knitter, and I dream of using only 100% cashmere. But more and more, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to reach that goal. You can only do so much. And for now, they keep our pastures clear of brambles, and they provide us with some really great nutrition, but truly their days are numbered. I mean, you remember what I was talking about earlier. There are only so many hours in a day. So dream big, but keep in mind that at some point, likely you will have to trim it back a little. I'm never going to have the time to deal with that cashmere, and keep the cheese business going and all the other things doing that I love. So maybe one of you out there will be doing that, and I'll be purchasing from you. But at the present time on the homestead, the only food that we don't actually produce for ourselves is eggs and coffee. I don't drink coffee, but Scott drinks a lot of coffee. So the egg situation will be rectified in a few months. I believe I've mentioned before that Scott didn't have the time to invest in building this elaborate chicken housing and protection. We'll get to that at some point, but not right away. But we wanted to stop buying eggs, and so his priority is getting that creamery functional. So instead, we opted for quail, and this is like 99% my project. Scott will build a couple of cages. Actually, has built one already, and once we have the cages for them, then the rest is kind of all on me. They're small, they're easy to care for. I think I can handle it. So with the addition of the quail, all of our food will now be produced on the homestead. We spend hours and hours working and sweating and loving every minute of our life. You just keep doing it, and you get there. We're meeting great new people just like you at the Whitfield Farmers Market. Come see us on Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 12 noon. Taste our grass-fed beef, lamb, and goat. I've got some samples there for you to taste. Talk to us about your interest in a herd share, and taste our yogurt. I have yogurt there for tasting as well. And there are lots of other great vendors there as well. And remember, you can come directly to the farm on Tuesday mornings, 10 a.m. to 12 noon, or Saturday afternoons from 3 to 5 p.m. Call if you need directions, and we'd love to help you get here. let's go to our recipe of the week. This is going to be a Greek seasoned ground beef. Now, this recipe is specifically for my keto and carnivore friends and listeners out there. That you're looking for just a different way to spice up some plain meat out there. And if you have a traditional diversified farm with all kinds of ruminant animals, then this recipe is for you. Or if you're shopping at your local farmer's market for a variety of grass-fed meats, this recipe is for you. It calls for 1 pound each of beef, lamb, and chev or goat. But you can use any combination of these meats. Or you could actually divide the spice ingredients by 3 and only use 1 pound of a meat of your choice. But here's what you'll need. You need, for the meat, a pound of beef, a pound of lamb, a pound of chev or goat, and then 3 tablespoons of butter. And then you have the spice mix. And it's 3 teaspoons of garlic minced, 1.5 teaspoons of dried oregano, 1.5 teaspoons of dried basil, 1.5 teaspoons of rosemary, 1.5 teaspoons of thyme, 3/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, 3 teaspoons of ground pepper. Now, the recipe calls for 3 teaspoons of salt, but you could use less. That's fine. I use much less. I probably only put 1 teaspoon of salt. And then you'll need 3/4 of a cup of water. So basically, you browned the meats until they're all fully cooked. You can drain the pan drippings out if you want, or you can leave them in there and add the butter in. It depends on where you are, what is your particular diet, how much fat do you need in your diet. Some of the keto dieters need a lot more fat. Some of the carnivore dieters also need a lot more fat. So you're going to add the butter. And the butter's actually optional, but let me tell you, it is so worth it. And then just mix in that. I have all my spices measured out into a small bowl, and I just sprinkle all those spices in there and mix that in, and the water. Add the water, and then you're going to simmer it for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. That is a fantastic little Greek seasoned meat. You can serve it with yogurt, or you could eat sour cream. I love it with sour cream. If you're not on a restricted carb diet, you could wrap it up in a tortilla. Or a pita, I guess is the Greek, so it could be a pita bread. So that's it. That's a really simple recipe. And so that's it for today's podcast. And I hope you found some inspiration to follow your dreams, whatever they may be. By continually putting one foot in front of the other, you will get there. Just keep the vision in front of you and keep plugging away. You start as small as you need to, and you build a little each day. And it doesn't matter how long it takes or what route you follow. It really doesn't. It's all about the journey. We have loved every moment. Even before we were here, you're just dreaming and you're building that dream, and it's just a wonderful life. It's all about the journey. And you're never going to reach your destination because there's always another dream in the making. So it is always all about the journey and living each day to the fullest. Go for it. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please hop over to Apple Podcasts. Give me a 5-star rating and a review. We'd really love it. We'd really appreciate it. Also, we'd really love it if you shared it with your friends or your family who might be interested in this type of content. Help us get the word out there. As always, I'm here to help you taste the traditional touch. Thank you so much for stopping by the homestead. And until next time, may God fill your life with grace and peace.